After running perfectly for months, as Hamilton is not running right. Hold the balance. Let's see.
He said it many times before in his show. I've seen it multiple times. You might as well just say it. The way he said token, black. You might as well just launch it with the ER. You might as well just say it. You know what I'm saying? He said it before multiple times. But he's spitting facts. When you're a black conservative and you're making conservative media, you have it easier. People will, I feel like now conservative media has simmered to a point where it really doesn't matter what demographic you are. But back in the day, 2016, 2017, if you were a black conservative, you had even a little bit of charisma, you had a career. You had a career. And the reality is this individual here is correct about Whitlock. He's correct. Whitlock's job is to say things white people can't say and to get paid to do so. And if you are a white political commentator who is racist, you're going to have a harder time building a substantial career than a black conservative who also believes negative things about black people and other demographics. We saw what happened to Candace. Candace used to talk crazy about blacks for years, still does probably to this day. And the moment she decided to speak crazy about the Jewish community, her and Daily Wire were at odds. But it doesn't just end there. The reality is Candace Owens cannot speak ill of one final community, unlike anyone else. Unlike everyone else, Candace Owens has one final community she can never critique, and that is conservative white America. Candace Owens is by no means free. I believe that's what she tweeted out when she was fired. I'm free now. Just stop. Calvin is still your master, okay? Benjamin might not be your master, but Calvin for damn sure still is your master. Don't in any way, shape, or form get ahead of yourself, Candace. Conservative white America still owns you. And if you ever critique them, your audience is gone. And you know it. Nick Fuentes is pointing out the truth about black conservatives. And the only way they're going to realize the shit that they're in is if conservative white Americans just tell them straight up, yo, you are a token. You're a token. And the reality is, black conservatives, for the most part, refuse to listen to black people, no matter what we say. Even black people like me, who are willing to talk about, the gang violence, the urban violence in the black community, even I, right, even someone like myself, cannot get through to a black conservative. It's impossible. It's impossible. You can't get through. They will not listen. They'll never listen. At one point, I thought the only people they'll ever listen to is white liberal, but then they found a way to demonize a white liberal. Now I've realized the only people that will listen to is white conservatives. And even then, I don't really know how many it's going to take before black conservatives finally realize how in deep they're in. Because Fuentes has always been seen as evil and crazy because he is. It's easy to brush off Fuentes. But how long until the rest of what Fuentes is saying becomes popular to say in right-wing media? Because all sorts of crazy things are becoming popular to say. It's not popular to deny. It's not popular to promote. It's not all the stuff Nick Fuentes was toiling away in the shadows doing is now normal on Twitter. Like everyone's just doing it. The shit he used to have to fight tooth and nail to do is now it's like tutorial mode for being a far right winger. All of them do it now and they get away with it. I mean, it's the First Amendment, right? But still, you get my point. There's no real significant pushback. It only stands to reason that if Fuentes could push me over to the window this far now, who's to say what else is going to become popular thanks to him? And he's going viral every other month on TikTok. It's only a matter of time before it becomes popular to speak this way to black people and to black conservatives and for anti-black racism to become a staple of American culture again. People like Jason Whitlock honestly and truly need to understand that these people are not your friends. White conservatives aren't even white liberals' friends. It's like these people don't like you. They're using you. You give them not the dignity of not being called racist for having an opinion. You give them the lie of being able to say, well, I'm not racist. Look at this black guy who's willing to say all the crazy things I can't say, because people will actually treat the ideas as what they are, racist. Now, one of my biggest issues is people don't treat black conservatives with the same scrutiny as white conservatives, and it gives them the ability to sneak these crazy ideas under the Overton window. And now,
Check that will.
Nick Fuentes becoming more popular now is not just Fuentes waking up every day and streaming. It's a combined effort of all of conservative media boiling up to this point where he is now becoming popular. And now, everyone has to pay the price, not just Jewish folk, but black folk too. He's going on anti-black rants all week now, thanks to that stabbing. So, Jason Whitlock and Tatum seem to think that they can have their cake and eat it too. And it's not going to happen. It's not possible. It's not. A lot of white conservatives have been waiting for a Fuentes. They've been waiting for a popular white commentator who can say all the stuff they want to say. At some point, the black conservative is no longer going to be a marketable stick. At some point, that stick is going to die. At this point, I feel like it's dead. I feel like black conservatives, frankly, don't have that same media appeal that they used to have. They just don't. I'm not seeing it.
I didn't bring my oils home.
As unfortunate as it is to have to be agreeing with Nick, he's right. Jason Whitlock, you are a token. You are not in any way, shape, or form indicative or emblematic of what the conservative movement actually wants deep down. They don't want to be led by a black person. Look at how much incompetence and buffoonery Donald Trump is able to get away with. You think a black man could get away with even 1/10? Look, they didn't even let Biden. They treat Biden like he's black. You would think, bro, the way they talk about Biden, you would think they would like come after him. Like they talk about
Biden, a true friend of the black.
But the audacity to look a white man in the eyes in like 1870 or something. Like they talk about Biden like he's black. You can only imagine how they treat a real black man who even acted in any way, shape, or form close to Trump. It's about time black conservatives realize you are on your own. I don't believe in saving conservatives of color from what they've chosen. They've chosen to be POCs, as I say, pets of Caucasians. They've chosen to be the pets of Caucasians. And frankly, when characters like Nick Fuentes and others unleash on them, I enjoy it. I enjoy it, and I feel no need to speak up about it. It's just like the Vivek Ramaswamy stuff. When Ramaswamy was being attacked, and Indians were being attacked, unfortunately, I'm like, bro, don't say anything. Don't try to stop it. This is a canned event that needs to happen. People, Vivek and company needs to see how these people really feel about them deep down. Because it seems like Vivek has bought into this nonsensical narrative that Curtis Yarvin is spreading of like this technocratic billionaire elite that's somehow biologically and spiritually superior to the rest of humanity, which we know is not true. It seems like Vivek perceives himself as being a part of that, and you're not. You are brown. And in America, white supremacy means white supremacy.
That Sam Hyde Vivek video is pretty funny.
Black with a few $1 million. It means white. White. Get it through your head. Now Vivek every other month is tweeting about how citizenship isn't just about race. It's like, dude, like, if you were liberal, you wouldn't have to be doing this. But now you're going to be spending the rest of your life trying to compel people to believe that citizenship is more than just race. You wouldn't have to do that if you were over here with us here on the left. You've chosen to cozy up to white nationalists, and then you're surprised in 2025 when they're starting to be far more open and upfront than ever. You helped them get to this point. I saw the clip of Ramaswamy saying, if they are a conservative. I don't. I'm not protecting Candace Owens, Jason Whitlock, Tatum, none of them. I'm not. And there will come a point where white conservatives finally say, "Ooh, finally we can stop talking to and interacting with these blacks privately, publicly on the internet. Finally, we're done." That day will probably come. And when it does, I don't want to hear shit from any of these black conservatives. And it disappoints me and it saddens me to see black people saying stuff like, "Oh, you're not going to call this out." No, I'm not going to. Why? What do I look like call? That's why when Richard Spencer called Candace Owens black and dumb like a few months ago, I retweeted it. No shame at all. I don't give a fuck. I'll say whatever I retweet whatever I want to retweet. I don't feel bad about it. I don't feel bad about it because this is what needs to happen. White people that don't like blacks reminding black conservatives of their place is important. It's really important for minority groups to realize you're not welcome as an equal. You're welcome as a tool. You're welcome as a chess piece, but you're not welcome as an equal. And it is incredibly important to understand that only white conservatives can break the spell. I can't tell them nothing. You can't tell them nothing. The white liberals can't tell them nothing. They call them a condescending white liberal. You have a savior complex. God forbid you try to save these motherfuckers. God forbid you try to save them. Black folk can't save them. White liberal can't save them. White conservative for damn sure won't save them. So that's what it's going to take. Let these people, scrape their knee. They won't listen to anybody. They won't. They say we're on the Democratic plantation. Meanwhile, they literally worship and celebrate people who fought a civil war to maintain slavery plantations. But okay. Then they call the white liberals white saviors and condescending liberals. Nothing. There's nothing anybody can say these days, bro. Nothing. It might take this. It's gonna take this. So, frankly, I think it's funny. I think it's hilarious. I think black conservatives need to realize this is the new era of conservative media. Characters like Fuentes and others are the future, and you cannot outrun this. The era of the black conservative is over. It is finished. It is done. They don't need you anymore. Trump is king. Conservatives don't follow the rule of law anymore, at least don't pretend to. Racism is cool now on Twitter. It's everywhere. Fuentes is unbanned. His audience on Rumble is massive. It's over. The era of the black conservative is over. The era of white conservatives pretending to enjoy being around you is over. Wake up, fool. Wake up. The conservative movement has never been for you. And you know it. Deep down, I think all black conservatives know that white conservatives are the ideological inheritors of the Confederacy. I think deep down they know. I just don't know what it's going to take for them to admit. Mm-hmm. But it is what it is. I don't know what to tell these people. I don't know what to tell black conservatives. See, but there's nothing you can tell them. But, Whitlock is behind the times. This is the new era of conservative media. Brazen, blatant racism. Straight up. And you helped it happen. Y'all helped it happen. Y'all helped it happen by helping Trump win. You helped it happen by supporting Musk and by defending Musk to this day. You black conservatives have been the facilitators of your own career demise. And no one can save you because y'all won't listen.
It's a natural question.
Yeah, we need more podcasts. That's what we need.
It showed that audiovisual content online tended to punch out at the far extremes of American political dialogue. The far left and the far right. The far right having a big advantage. The center ground lay abandoned and seemingly
Exactly.
barren.
That's why I'm a radical centrist.
That's not the way things are in real life. In real life, most of us are pretty level-headed people. And we approach the world in a spirit of curiosity, not anger, looking for insights, not insults. Yet, when the sound comes on and the video comes up, things are suddenly different. And the worst
A few years ago, when I was in college, working on the original Tourist Cabinet of Curiosities podcast, I worked at a summer camp. It was fun, a little draining, but very rewarding. I learned that I love working with children, and I also learned that young children are weird as hell. During one of my last weeks at the camp, there was a kid in my cabin group who was intent on saying something more impressive than whatever one particular other kid said. If the other kid said, "I once ate an orange with the peel on," this one kid would say, "I once ate a banana with the peel on." If the other kid said, "My grandma died before I was born," this one other kid would say, "My parents died before I was born." Life around these kids was a constant drumbeat of, "Oh yeah, well I." The kid who kept being upstage was never too annoyed by it and found it funny, which everyone else did too, so I never put a stop to it. One day, at lunch, the kid who was Mr. I'm more interesting than you's target said out of nowhere, "I once saw a llama on an island." So naturally, Mr. I'm more interesting than you responded, "I once saw 2 llamas on 2 islands." I thought
That's
this was
pretty
so funny
impressive.
that I said, "I once saw 3 llamas on 3 islands," and the race was on. The other kids began chiming in with all the llamas they'd seen, each standing on their own personal llama island. We passed 5 llamas on 5 islands, 10 llamas on 10 islands, 100 llamas on 100 islands, then jumped all the way from 1,000 llamas on 1,000 islands to 1,000,000 llamas on 1,000,000 islands. The pile of llamas grew predictably from there, past 1,000,000,000 llamas through a few well-known but non-existent numbers like a gazillion llamas and a bajillion llamas, until one kid took the plunge and said he'd seen a Google llamas on a Google island.
Isn't it a Googleplex?
What are Google llamas? Most people know, intellectually, how much a Google is. It's 10 to the 100th power.
I didn't know that intellectually.
But how many llamas is that? It's probably unsurprising to learn that there are not a Google llamas on Earth. There aren't 2 Google islands either. In fact, there isn't really a Google of anything. There aren't even a Google atoms in the observable universe. Given astronomers' current estimates of the size of the universe, there's somewhere between 10 to the 78th power and 10 to the 82nd power atoms in the observable universe, which sounds reasonably close to a Google on the surface, but remember how those tricky exponents work. Even going with the upper bound of 10 to the 82, we would need a quintillion universes to get to a Google atoms. About as many universes as there are grains of sand on Earth. Now, it's possible that's wrong. The universe could instead be infinite. If the universe is infinite, not only are there definitely a Google atoms in it, there are definitely a Google llamas on a Google islands. There's definitely a planet that's nothing but a shallow ocean with llamas standing on islands. There's definitely a Google of those planets. In an infinite universe, everything that can happen under the laws of physics would happen an infinite number of times in an infinite
Actually, I
number
heard
of
that
places. Therefore, there
the
would be
monkeys
infinite
writing
worlds.
Shakespeare
How could
thing
you end up exactly
is
like
not all that
completely our same
probable.
animals and our same land
That even
forms.
getting them to
In
write a
total,
word is
there would be
hard.
4 more than Google llamas on a Google Islands. But the universe probably isn't infinite, it's just unimaginably vast. But not as unimaginably vast as a Google. Let's return to our llamas and our islands. The conversation over lunch at camp was heating up. A Google wasn't the biggest number these kids knew. After a Google had been brought out, the original kid who started the llamas on islands game dropped an even bigger bombshell. He had seen a Googleplex llamas on a Googleplex islands. He'd just taken this up so many notches. A Googleplex is one with a Google zeros. Consider just how many times larger this is than a Google. 100 zeros may be a lot, but you could write a Google on 1 page of a pocket notebook. It would probably take about a minute or so. There isn't enough space in the entire universe to write a Googleplex. If you printed zeros at 10-point type over every possible flat surface in the universe, the walls of the room you're in right now, the ice on Europa, the roofs of every village schoolhouse in Cameroon, the asteroids in the Kuiper Belt, all the pages of every book ever written, the surface of barren planets and distant galaxies, the full extent of the Australian outback, you'd still be a fraction of the way toward writing a Googleplex. That's not how big the quantity itself is. That's just what it takes to write the number googolplex in conventional notation. Picture that. Now, picture in comparison how easy it is to write 100 zeros. That's how much larger a googolplex is than a Google. But then, I shut down their silly little game and won, once and for all. I said I'd seen a Graham's number of llamas on a Graham's number of islands. What is Graham's number? How big is that? I'm your host, Tor Parsons, and this is my co-host, Jelly Bitterian, and welcome to Tor's Cabinet of Curiosities. There is no biggest number. I hope that's abundantly clear. The whole point of numbers is that they go on forever, because conceivably, there's an infinite quantity of things you can count. But, as I've shown, there is a point where you run out of candles, spiders, puppet vampires, and, yes, llamas to count. In a finite universe, there is a finite number of things you can describe with numbers. Beyond that point, numbers become basically useless, because nothing is that big. So in a way, there is a biggest number. What is that point? Where do numbers get too big to exist? Graham's number is a decent candidate. None other than the Guinness Book of World Records has certified Graham's number as the biggest number ever used in a mathematical proof. And while the Guinness Book of World Records isn't as reliable a source as they'd like you to think, it's true that when Graham's number was published in 1977, it was the biggest number most mathematicians had ever come across. Graham's number was first calculated by Ronald Graham, who was working on an extremely niche, esoteric problem with very few applications in the real world, as you do when you're a pure mathematician. An oversimplification of the problem would go something like this. Suppose you have a whole bunch of people and they're all divided into several different groups. Doesn't matter how many groups there are, and some people can be in multiple groups at once. Now, start drawing lines between the groups of people so that every group is connected with every other group by one line and one line only. Color some of the lines blue and some of them red. It doesn't need to be evenly 50-50 red and blue. Any combination is fine. Your question is, what is the minimum number of total people possible so that there are at least 4 groups, and all 4 groups are linked to each other by lines of the same color, and everyone is in an even number of groups? This is not the problem Graham was working on. For one thing, his problem involved n-dimensional hypercubes, which sounds like a MacGuffin in a Marvel movie, but is actually a thing that serious mathematicians sit around and think about, including my grandfather and namesake, the original Tor Parsons. N-dimensional figures were sort of his thing. He was a personal friend of Ronald Graham, in fact. Anyway, I'm definitely making my grandfather roll over his grave by saying this, but you can take out the n-dimensional hypercubes and replace them with groups of people, and the problem that leads to Graham's number is still roughly the same. So, Graham found that, understandably, the minimum number of people for this to be possible varies a lot, depending on, among other things, how many lines you color red and how many lines you color blue. He was able to establish bounds on the problem, though. The smallest possible minimum number of people was 6. The largest possible was Graham's number. So, how did he calculate Graham's number?
Slowly, getting faster.
The simplest way of starting
starting with a small number and getting to a bigger one is just counting. 1, 2, 3, you know the deal. But you could add the numbers together instead and grow at a much faster rate. Consider adding 3 plus 3 plus 3 plus 3. Look, you've gotten to 12 already with only 4 numbers. Then, of course, there's multiplication. 3 times 3 times 3 times 3 gets you to 9 times 3 times 3, which gets you to 81. We're out of the world of linear growth now, Toto. We're in exponential land. You could obviously write 3 times 3 times 3 times 3 as an exponent, 3 to the 4th. But from there, we can get into operations that go even faster than ordinary exponents. Something called tetration, where you stack exponents. Check this out. 3 to the 3rd power, to the 3rd power, to the 3rd power. A tower of powers, if you will. You evaluate these from the top down. So in the case of 3 to the 3 to the 3 to the 3 to the 3, you can turn this into 3 to the 3 to the 27. So now your exponent is 3 to the 27 power. 3 times 3 times 3 times 3, etc. 27 times. It shouldn't be a surprise that this is a huge number. It works out to around 7.6 trillion, and we're not done yet. We now need to raise 3 to the 7.6 trillionth power. This results in a number with 3.6 trillion digits. If I added just one more 3, we'd get to a number way bigger than Googleplex, and that's just powers of 3 stacked on top of each other 4 times. The way mathematicians write situations like this is with the number being stacked, 3 in our case, then an up arrow, then the number of times it's being stacked, 4 in our case. That innocuous equation results in a 3.6 trillion digit number. You look at a tetration equation like that, and you're likely to say, what horrible tortures did that up arrow inflict on that 3? How do you get a number so big from just 3, up arrow, 4? So exciting, you can do even swankier shit than this. I promise we'll get around to Graham's number soon. The next operation up, no, we are not stopping yet, is called pentation. Pentation works like this. You have a bunch of towers of powers next to each other. The first one has as many levels as the number being raised at many levels. That is 3 to the 3 to the 3, or 4 to the 4 to the 4 to the 4, or 5 to 5 to 5 to 5 to 5, you get it. Then, whatever the outcome of this first power tower is, becomes the height of the next power tower. The height! Consider that just 3 stacked 3 times is 7.6 trillion. So imagine how big the result of 3 stacked 7.6 trillion times must be. Actually, don't imagine that. Humans aren't made for numbers this big. It's literally impossible to imagine. Then, once you have that unimaginably vast number, you can, if you want, make that number the height of another power tower. The world is your oyster. Nothing's stopping you from adding more. This, again, can be innocuously written using arrows. 3 towers of powers involving 3s can be written as 3, then 3 up arrows. The result is a number so much bigger than a Googleplex that the difference between a Googleplex and a 1 is negligible. One more step. The way you can combine numbers to make addition, and combine adding numbers to make multiplication, and combine multiplying numbers to make exponents, and combine exponents to make power towers, and combine power towers to make pentation, you can combine the chains of power towers. You use pentation in a process called hexation. In hexation, you start with a chain of power towers, each one feeding into the next, and then the outcome to the first chain of power towers becomes the number of power towers you use in the next term. So, suppose you have 3 power towers of 3. The unimaginably huge number that results from that becomes the unimaginably huge number of power towers in the next chain. As we predict, hexation is written using 4 up arrows. A 3 followed by 4 up arrows. That 3 means a chain of 3 power towers. Then 2 more increasingly butt-fuckingly huge chains of butt-fuckingly huge power towers. At this point, trying to make sense of the size of these numbers is useless. We've progressed past the mouth gaping open, oh my god, these numbers are too large stage. By now, not only is the number of atoms in the universe vanishingly small in comparison, the number of Planck volumes in the universe is a drop in the bucket too. Planck volumes are the smallest possible space. Yes, that's a thing in physics. You can think of that as the pixel resolution of the universe, and an average atom is 10 to the 60th power times larger than one of them. For comparison, the Milky Way galaxy is about 10 to the 21 times larger than Jolly Durian. So when I said there wasn't a Google of anything in the universe, I wasn't quite telling the truth. There's far more than a Google of Planck volumes. But by now, we're dealing with numbers that have more digits than there are Planck volumes in the universe. There isn't even any use gawking at these. You kind of just have to accept that these numbers are huge and there's no way to wrap your mind around them. And we haven't even gotten to Graham's number yet. But we can calculate Graham's number. The first term of Graham's number is a number called G1. G1 is the result of a hexation equation. 3, up arrow, up arrow, up arrow, up arrow, 3. A chain of 3 impossibly gigantic power towers, then an impossibly gigantic chain of even more gigantic power towers, and then an even bigger chain. It's easy to think of all big numbers as being created equal, but let's just say that if you estimated you had Graham's number of llamas, then you counted them and were off by G1, you'd still be right on the money. That difference would be negligible. In fact, it's so negligible that guessing a Graham's number and being off by a difference of G1 is freakishly accurate. It's like throwing a baseball to a planet orbiting Alpha Centauri, aiming for one specific stitch to impact one specific grain of sand, and getting the next grain of sand over. Currently, without having fully detailed how we get to Graham's number, G1 is definitely the biggest number you've ever heard described. But compared to Graham's number, it's tiny. Once you've got G1, you go from G2. G1 is written as 3, then 3 up arrows, then another 3. G2 is written as a 3, then G1 up arrows, then another 3. I'm going to pause to let you consider that. Alright, well, turns out you can't consider it. But what you do to go to G2 from G1 is you take the chain of power towers you used to get G1, and you make that into a chain. G1, chains of power towers. And then you make chains of those chains of chains, and chains of those, and so on until you have chains of chains of chains of chains of chains, etc. nested G1 times. Once you have G2, you do the same thing a G2 number of times to get G3. Each rate grows at a rate way beyond exponential growth. To get Graham's number, you have to go all the way to G64. That's Graham's number. A number so high, there's no word for it. A number so high, the number of digits in the number expressing how many digits it has would be too large to fit in the universe. Planck volume by Planck volume. Probably the largest number anyone, including mathematicians, will ever encounter. Of course, once I'd gotten there, my campers, if they were sharp, could have defeated me by saying, I've seen Graham's number plus 1 llamas on Graham's number plus 1 islands. Graham's number isn't the biggest number, obviously, but it is a number that really matters in a process with some real-life applications, possibly, and there may be no bigger number that fits that bill. My main source for this episode, Dave Sinha, the head of the University of Oregon Math Department, has this fantastic analogy. So, we here in Oregon, we pride ourselves in growing big pumpkins. They're a national contest for who can grow the biggest pumpkins, and Oregonians often win. But these pumpkins are specifically bred to be gigantic. Giant pumpkin growers share techniques, some have trade secrets, they pump them full of fertilizer, they do everything they can to make their pumpkins huge above all else. If you've grown a 2,000-pound pumpkin, yeah, that's impressive. But it's even more impressive if you were just growing pumpkins without caring about their size, just growing them for pies or jack-o'-lanterns or whatever, and it just so happened that one of your pumpkins grew to 2,000 pounds. That's what Graham's number is like to the system. Some people have tried to come up with functions that create absurdly large numbers simply for the purpose of creating huge numbers, but Graham wasn't trying to do that when he came up with Graham's number. He was trying to solve a real-life math problem, and that turned out to be the upper bound. You can probably make numbers that are as arbitrarily huge as you want, but Graham made an insanely huge number without intending to. That's why Graham's number matters so much. It's like a pumpkin naturally growing to this size without trying to make it the biggest pumpkin. It serves a purpose beyond just being huge. Alright, so in this analogy, Who are the giant pumpkin growers of the math world? A select few in the amateur field of Googology, the study of large numbers. The Googology community, if such a thing can be said to exist, is nebulous, and its primary record is a fandom wiki page, comprising a remarkable 13,042 pages, which is fittingly a large number. Examples of the topics in Googology wiki pages include 1. A Ugrate duplex, for which the article helpfully notes the name of this number is based on the suffix T-duplex and the number A Ugrea. Absolutely godly, ultimate, omega, mega, super, even more god or tri-tri. A name that was apparently coined by Googology user Hayden the Googologist 2009. Beeping busy beeper function. Actually, remember that one for later. Big ass number, which is a defined series of functions. Dim sum, another number named by Hayden the Googologist 2009. A series of numbers collectively known as Flannery of Ukrainian Town. Googology Wiki can have an article with any gibberish if it's assigned to a number, a page title that is, wait for it, the name of an actual number. Graph. Southwest Bacon Whopper, also known as a Decadohectaculus. Spookbillion. And, my absolute favorite, onion-infused multi-dimensional beef. Beef is supposed to be written in all caps. God, I love autism. If anyone could be expected to have the largest name number in their sites, it would be this group. And here we have to set some ground rules. Clearly we're not trying to find the largest number, nor are we just trying to name some absurdly large number. For example, now that I understand the power tower process that gets you up to Graham's number, recognizing that Graham's number is G64, I could now create a number that dwarfs Graham by going up to G Googleplex. Or, hell, nothing's stopping me from going to G Graham's number. There we go. Recursive Graham's number. If that number doesn't already have a batshit bonkers name on Googology Wiki, which it probably does, I'm going to call that the Jolly Lurian number. But, as huge as that number probably is, it isn't a candidate for the largest named number. Any fool can go on Googology Wiki and say, I know a number bigger than Graham's number plus 1! So, for that reason, the candidates for the largest named number need to be reached by their own specific mathematical process. You can't just piggyback on the process that you use to reach some other big number. You can't math together a bunch of existing big numbers and call that a new big number. That's not a named number. That's what the Googology community calls a salad number. You're not putting in the effort to make a new number, you're just throwing in a bunch of numbers together. You can do that as much as you want because, of course, numbers are infinite. The actually interesting question is, what is the largest number we can define using math? In 2007, just for fun, a pair of professors, Augustine Ryo of MIT and Adam Elga of Princeton, held a big number duel. The rules were simple. Elga wrote a number on a chalkboard, then Ryo wrote a number that's bigger than it. The duel ended when one of them couldn't come up with a number that they could be sure was larger than the one their opponent just named. Every number had to have a value that was, at least in theory, calculable. No writing hypothetical, undefined numbers like the biggest number my opponent can think of plus 1. Nothing infinite, and no salad numbers. If your opponent wrote a Graham's number, you couldn't say a Graham's number to the Graham's number power. The participants in the duel had to show that they knew their shit about math by doing something original with each turn. Some new process had to be introduced each time. It started with Elga writing the number 1 on the board, starting small and journeying 1,000 miles and all. Ryan just then added a bunch more ones, 30 or 40 from most sources I've heard, so that the board was entirely covered by ones. Big number? Yeah, sure, but that Elga one-upped Ryo, pun intended, in a way that if I'd been there, even if I'd been a world-class mathematician, would have made me throw down my chalk and concede defeat.
This guy might be better than me. You're right. I am better than me.
It's not that it was a particularly big number, still probably way smaller than Graham's, or even G1 of the sequence that leads to Graham's, but no mathematician could ever match the sheer stylishness of what Elga did. He licked his finger and erased a line across most of the ones in the number, turning them into exclamation points. He had changed a long number composed of ones into 11 factorial, 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 on and on and on, which was, of course, way bigger. 11 factorial with just one exclamation point, 11 times 10 times 9 times 8 and so on, is in the neighborhood of 40 million. Then try doing another factorial of that, and then doing a factorial of the result of that, so on about 30 or 40 times. He had already taken this into the realm of numbers too large to write in the universe. Ryo was cornered. If this had been WWE, the folding chair would have been right about to come down over his head. Then, he remembered something, and he went to the board and wrote, "Busy Beaver function of a Google. I told you we'd get back here, right?" Busy Beaver functions show that the tradition of giving outrageous names to giant numbers isn't limited to a bunch of champion nerds on the internet, because the name Busy Beaver goes all the way back to 1962, and is the best known example of a non-computable function. What do I mean by non-computable? You could say that the function of least Grams number is non-computable because it grows so damn fast. There aren't a lot of computers in the world that could evaluate a power tower of 3 stacked 7.6 trillion times, and that's just the first of a lot of steps all the way to get a Grams number. Now, that hints at something fundamental about all these gigantic numbers, but I'll get to that later. What you should be getting from this right now is that that doesn't mean non-computable. A function that grows too fast for an ordinary computer to evaluate it isn't non-computable because, hypothetically, some mega supercomputer in the distant future could evaluate it. A planet-sized Matryoshka brain would be able to calculate Grams number in a jiffy. But there are some functions that are non-computable in a weirder, much more eerie way. It's in the nature of these functions that they are impossible for a computer to calculate. Naturally, these are functions that involve computers themselves. Alan Turing, the father of modern computing, conceived of something called the halting problem. The idea is you've got a computer that you program to do something using a binary input. Ones and zeros on a modern computer, or hole punches and not hole punches in a tape in Turing states. Some programs might finish at some point, which is called halting, while others might get into a loop and repeat, going on forever. So, how can you tell whether a given input for a program will halt or not? Amazingly, Turing proved that you can't, at least not using computers you can. His conclusion was, if there was an algorithm that could examine any input and determine if it halts or not, you could program it to run forever if it halts, and halt if it runs forever. And clearly that's not possible. It's like a computing equivalent able brain to blur, this sentence is a lie. A really simple program, like, say, print Jollibee the Durian is a bitch-ass motherfucker, is pretty easy to evaluate. Obviously, it halts after printing Jollibee the Durian is a bitch-ass motherfucker. But for a more complicated program, one that has real-world application, the only way to determine if a program will halt or not is to run it and see. If it eventually halts, there's your answer, but if it keeps going, that's not proof that it goes on forever, because you can't be sure it won't eventually halt at some point. In order to tell if a program will halt, you need some hardcore math. Enter the Busy Beavers. The Busy Beaver function was created in 1962 by a guy named Tibor Rada, who wasn't even an Oregon State graduate, so God knows where he got that name for this function. Maybe he's an ancestor of Hayden the Googologist 2009. The genesis of the Busy Beavers comes from how every computer program needs to have a certain number of rules. For instance, print Jollibee the Durian is a bitch-ass motherfucker is a program with one rule that takes one step and then halts. Print Jollibee the Durian is a bitch-ass motherfucker and continue is a program with one rule that takes infinite steps and never halts. Print Jollibee the Durian is a bitch-ass motherfucker, generate a random number between 1 and 10, and if the number is odd, continue, is a program with 3 rules that takes an undefined but finite number of steps. Of course, most programs have lots and lots of rules. Some of them halt and some of them don't. Tibor Rada asked the question, what is the maximum finite number of steps a program that halts can take before halting if it started out with n rules? The max possible number of steps that a halting program with n rules can take is called the nth Busy Beaver number. The Busy Beaver function is inherently non-computable because a computer can't figure out when it will halt, and it grows faster than any other function in existence. Even those power towers that we worked with earlier on are no match for these Busy Beavers. It's pretty obvious that the first Busy Beaver number, that is, the maximum possible number of steps for a halting program with one rule, is just 1. All programs with one rule are either something like print Jollibee the Durian is a bitch-ass motherfucker, or print Jollibee the Durian is a bitch-ass motherfucker and continue. Either it has one step, or it goes on forever. Mathematicians have discovered that the second Busy Beaver number, the max number of steps a program with 2 rules can take before we can be sure it will never halt, is 6. Just 6? That's not very impressive. A lot of mathematical busy work, since you can't use computers on these problems, led us to a proof of the third Busy Beaver number in 1965. It's 21. That is, if a computer program with 3 rules has gone on for more than 21 steps, it'll go on forever. It took all the way until 1983 to prove that the fourth Busy Beaver is 107. The fifth Busy Beaver wouldn't be confirmed for 40 years. An amateur mathematician in 1984 found a 5-rule program that goes on for 2,133,492 steps and then halts. Just 5 years later, a 5-rule program was discovered that only halts after 47 million steps. In 2024, it was proven to be the largest possible 5-rule program, making it the first time in my lifetime a new Busy Beaver was confirmed. We know that the 6th Busy Beaver is at least 8.6 quadrillion, and possibly larger. As smirk-inducing as the Busy Beaver name is, I find the idea of busy beavers to be kind of scary. The idea that there are details of machines we've built that we can't fully understand just doesn't sit right with me. With the rise of AI, unexplainable phenomena within computers are increasingly becoming part of pop culture. Look up lobe, for instance. L-O-A-B, lobe. I promise you won't be disappointed. Other unwanted emotion maybe, but not disappointed. But before lobe, there were the Busy Beavers, the original ghosts in the machine. Now let's return to the big number duel. Ryle had written the Google Busy Beaver number, a number we don't know the exact value of and almost definitely never will, but is certainly finite, with an exact value and a huge-ass number. Now Elga was the one backed up to the wall. What number could he possibly write that was definitely bigger than that? He did something that I personally consider a cop-out, barely any better than doing a solid number. He introduced the idea of super Turing machines, a hypothetical type of computer that can calculate the Busy Beaver sequence. They're not actually possible, but if they were, they still wouldn't be able to determine when they themselves will halt. This computer would be able to tell when another computer will halt, but not when it will halt. See where this is going? A super Turing machine necessitates the existence of a super Busy Beaver sequence. You can take this up as many steps as you want, past super Turing machines to super duper Turing machines, and that's what Elga and Ryo did. Ryo countered with a super duper Busy Beaver number, and Elga responded with a super duper duper Busy Beaver number. The referees were beginning to frown on this. It wasn't really within the rules of the big number duel because they were basically just one-upping each other with the same basic idea. So then, Ryo stepped up to the chalkboard, looked Elga in the eye, and finished him. He wrote, "The largest number expressible in the language of first-order set theory with under a Google symbols." First-order set theory is a mathematical language with all sorts of symbols you really don't need to learn about, like upside-down A's and backwards E's and shit. Expressing small numbers in first-order set theory is difficult and cumbersome. You need a lot of symbols just to write one. But bigger numbers are a breeze because you can express them as a result of various functions. You can write the Busy Beaver function in first-order set theory. You can write the tree function, another fast-growing function beloved among Googologists because the third term of the tree function is already larger than Graham's number. The number Ryo used to win the big number duel is the largest number that allows the use of a Google symbols in first-order set theory. So you can nest the tree function inside itself, you can do the Busy Beaver number for the Googleplex term of tree, knock yourself out. Interestingly, you can't use Graham's number because of how hard it is to write Graham's number in simplified notation. Think of all the arrows we had to write to get there. Graham's number cannot be expressed with fewer than a Google symbol in first-order set theory, but numbers much larger than it can. That's Ryo's number, and because I live in Eugene, Oregon, I think I should call it the duck number, because it beats the beavers. Most mathematicians consider it the largest possible number ever described. Anything bigger is a solid number that just builds on Ryo's idea. In some ways, that's our answer. That's where numbers get too big for math to describe them. But is the duck number a number? Or is it just a concept? Is it the idea of a number? Googology Wiki itself cast some doubt on the legitimacy of the big number duel. Top of the page for the big number duel, there's a quote from a YouTube video about the duel that says, "Philosophy and mathematics have no place together. Shame on you, MIT, for allowing this garbage. I guess MIT is turning into an art school now." I think the quote is there because even Googleologists find it funny and absurd that A, there was a big number duel, and B, people have strong opinions on whether it constitutes math. But there's a point to that comment. Keep this in mind. Most of the coverage of the big number duel mistakenly described Ryo and Elga as mathematicians. They're not. They're both professors of philosophy. Maybe the largest named number isn't really a good mathematical question. And what's the first digit of the duck number? How about the last? We don't know. Mathematicians don't even know how they'd start finding the exact value of the duck number. What proof is there that any given large number is the largest number expressible with under and equal symbols in first order set theory? It's all very wishy-washy. Ultimately, it isn't much better defined than saying the biggest number my opponent can think of plus 1. Dr. Sinha says the constraint he'd put on Googleology Wiki, if he could, would be that you have to place your number on a number relative to all the other numbers on a site. It has to be calculable enough that you know which other big numbers it's bigger than and which ones it's smaller than. And other than Graham's number, which does have a clear set value that we can calculate more or less, most other things cited as the biggest number don't pass this test. The busy beavers, beyond the fifth term of that function, we have no idea what they are and what they're bigger than or not. How about recursive Graham's number, G Graham's number, the one that I called the Jollibee the Durian number? That's got a clear value, but is the duck number bigger or smaller than that? We don't know. Most of these numbers are just floating around in big number space, unable to be compared to other big numbers or anything tangible. And that's not a number, that's the idea of a number. So then, what's the biggest number for which we know all the digits? There's an answer out there, but I don't think anyone's come up with it. Dr. Sinha certainly didn't know when I asked him. We don't know the exact values of most of the busy beaver numbers. We don't know the exact values for most of the terms of the tree function. We don't even know the exact value of Graham's number. There's a process for calculating the last few digits of Graham's number. We know that it ends in a 7. On the internet, where you can find anything, thank you Al Gore, there exists a 1,600-page document detailing the last 16 million digits of Graham's number. Of course, nowhere close to the whole number. The whole number, again, wouldn't fit in the universe, but we also can't calculate the first digit of it without knowing all the rest of the digits first. We will never know the first digit of Graham's number. So, what's the largest number we, and by we I mean humanity, could calculate if we wanted to? There are no clear estimates as to the total computing capacity of humanity, but all our brains working together are probably stronger than all our computers working together. Computer scientists and neurologists alike are quick to mention that the human brain is not a computer, nor is it anything like a computer. It's not easy to take computing terminology and map it onto the workings of a human brain, but I can tell you this with some confidence. If all 8 billion humans were to gather in the Australian outback and use their collective brain power to function as single neurons in one vast brain, think childhood's end, then we still wouldn't be able to calculate Graham's number within the expected age of the universe. We wouldn't be able to reach a googolplex either, and that's assuming that 8 billion human brains working together create a brain 8 billion times more powerful than humanity.
Who knows?
Which is a very... This whole hypothetical doesn't
We'll get it
really
figured
say
out
about
at work.
free will. It's just as fantastical as a super range. What's the largest number you can get to without